Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Dan Kershaw, Executive Director at Furniture Bank, a registered charity and social enterprise that offers a furniture removal and pickup service. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Dan Kershaw, Executive Director of Furniture Bank, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
So, Dan, I had the pleasure of hearing you speak just a couple of weeks ago, I guess now, at the University of Toronto in Mississauga. And I was just so moved by your presentation, not just on the Furniture Bank, but your approach to charities, not-for-profits in general. I mean, you just seem to take a different lens and may I say, maybe some of the for-profit kind of view, but applying it to the not-for-profit. And I'd love to talk about that before we get into Furniture Bank, because you've been recognized as an expert in charity-powered innovation and use of technology. And those are just words that you don't hear a lot together.
No, they aren't. No, and 10 years ago, I was in the for-profit space. I've had a computer when I was like 6, and for those you probably can't see, I used to have a lot of hair. I used to have very bright red hair, but I had old computers, and I got pulled after a degree in environmental studies. I got pulled into doing an MBA, and I ended up in telecom, and then that pulled me into the startup world. And I spent 15 plus years in startups, building software, building new, at the time, this new thing called the internet was like new. So I worked with a lot of shareholders.
Well, hasn't it?
Yeah, I did well. As I say, I made a lot of shareholders really rich, and I got to see what business for bad looks like, where shareholders are doing things for their own benefit without thinking of those around them or the community they work in. I'm summarizing it like I had full insight at the time, but I'm looking back. And serendipity struck, and I had a phone call from a recruiter saying, "You ever thought of running a charity?" And I said some very inappropriate words at the time. But the recruiter who knew me and knew sort of how I'm wired says, "You really should look at it." They have a social enterprise. First time I'd heard that word. They were using Salesforce to run the charity. I knew Salesforce. So I took a flyer and I went for a tour. And here I am 10 years later. So I come with, well, what would you do in a startup? What would you do in a business? As a posture is probably a good phrase. And, it's really important for the listeners to understand a for-profit and a nonprofit is just a legal form. Just it. That's it. For-profits and nonprofits can have the exact same culture. They can have the exact same tools. They can have the exact same decision-making. But what I discovered over 10 years is that's not how the two sectors work. And the presentation I was giving was the first time I've really unpacked and presented a narrative that I've shared with some of my colleagues in the social profit sector. That there was this fellow we all know, Steve Jobs, who has this famous quote: "It's more fun being a pirate than joining the Navy." And that has always resonated with me, that much of the sector, and I'm sure the same applies in business, that many organizations, irrespective of the legal format, follow the Navy way. Hierarchy, rules, tradition, silos, waiting to be told what to do. And most staff at those locations are there for the paycheck. And we're living in a world today which is complex. It's too complex. I was there to talk to grad students about sustainability. Sustainability is three things. It's environmental sustainability, we all know. It's social sustainability, and it's economic sustainability. And those three things are rarely talked about at the same time. And you layer in this weird world of hyper volatility, hyper uncertainty, hyper complexity, hyper ambiguity. They call it VUCA, they being business professionals. So we have this moment where, whether I'm talking to staff or my peers, or in the case of where we met, grad students, you had 400 grad students who, they're all going to leave that class and they're all going to be, what do I do with my life? Where do I search for a career with meaning? Because we all want one. And it was an opportunity to help, I hope just a few realize that you have to be intentional, but there are lots of organizations out there that do live, eat, breathe the idea. I'm calling it being a social prophet, who is, very focused on being audacious about making the world better, not the shareholders better, but the world better, the community better. And this is the first time I've tried it on, and I got some good feedback on how to fine tune the message, because it's nuanced. But a lot of the principles you would find, this pirate navy metaphor took over Silicon Valley in the early days. You can go find groups that are pirates. They say are. So a lot of it is, I think, that kind of mindset is needed in the social sector more than ever, because the nature of the problems that we're all trying to grapple with are just getting more and more complex. In part, the other quote I did during the presentation is Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Both businesses and social purpose organizations are still, for the most part, doing the same thing over and over again. And that was my call to the students, it's on you to pick organizations that want to actually change the world, not just the rainbow washing that many organizations are sharing, that we're doing a little bit, buy our product, buy our service, make our donation.
Right. So as you tell that story, and you talk about students, and we were both there, in for different reasons, but both for sustainability opportunities, and again, some of this people will see us, some it's Apple and Spotify. When I went to university, and that was business school, and my master's in finance, and I got to say, there were no courses, there were no lectures, there were no presentations on doing good for the world. Like, no. it didn't exist within it. And so I got to say, I'm super excited that this exists today. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying there isn't that the rainbow wash, or however we describe what's being done by some businesses, but the fact that our kids can work for not-for-profits, or in our case of being there, for profits that truly are investing a lot of time and money in making their businesses socially conscious. So yeah, to me, there's a hell of a bright spot.
Yeah, no, and I'm excited because there's actually a discussion going on at schools around the world that it's more than the tokenism of doing good, or the veneer. I like colorful language. We need organizations like Patagonia that's not just doing a little thing, but they're doing big things that, as a boulder in a pond, have waves of change that affect other organizations. And I think I see lots of students come through, come and look for work at Furniture Bank. Sorry, I have to turn off all of these instant messaging, instant communication devices. And I want to make sure that students, and I guess I love students because they still have a flexible mindset. They may not have the growth mindset that you need to have to be a pirate, but they have a flexible mindset. And I didn't touch on it so much during the presentation, but I also want to avoid the heropreneurship that I also see, that students get into doing something, I'm going to change the world. But if you had a psychologist, really, why are you doing what you're doing? It's because they want to feel good, because there's lots. Canada is interesting. It's very hard to create a charity in Canada, which is fine. In the States, it's really, really easy, to the point where there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of charities that are just spun up by a student who wants to do good, and then it's left to the side. So numerically, the number of charities between the two countries are different. So we have an interesting ecosystem where students can be very intentional, get the training, the networking, so that they can pick a B Corp or for-profit or a nonprofit legal form, and know that where they put their energy and their talents are actually going to make a real and measurable, transparent difference to the world. And those are, areas that I'm interested in, is this conversation around ESG, environmentals, social and governance reporting that many businesses have to do, because it's a risk that there'll be a lot of confusion in the market. So I spend a lot of my day job trying to push the impact measurement side of things, so that we all, when you donate to Furniture Bank, when you hire our social enterprise, or when a business works with us, they can have real transparency on the impact that their dollars and their donations have. And I think that's important, not just for charities, but to be extended, that we as consumers can very clearly see the impact that businesses have on the community and the environment and society in general.
So you mentioned impact measurement. Is that a specific measurement, or is that something that is created? Are there guidelines?
Yeah. So when I came into this job, I was a quant guy, still am. Big data, Excel, statistics, all that was fun.
You're exciting.
Yeah, I for kicks, I taught college students introductory to statistics. That's how demented I am, or at least people have told me. But when I arrived at Furniture Bank, what I didn't realize at the time is we were in a fiscal crisis. I didn't bother looking at the financial statements when I took the job, and I was days into, maybe it was 2 weeks into learning what this social sector is. Somebody had lined up a meeting with a funder, and I met a foundation, and I explained everything that we had, and they were nodding, and they were very vigorous about, this is a really social purpose organization, social enterprise power, all that stuff. And then they turned to me and said, well, so what is the return on dignity for providing a child a bed? Now, we all know,
Wow.
it is fundamentally wrong for a child to sleep on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody argues that. But they wanted the equivalence of an ROI, a value,
Yep.
which was my first exposure to impact measurement. Fast forward 10 years. There are many ways of measuring impact. So what I describe is the way that makes sense to Furniture Bank, but there are many ways. I also sit on the board of the Common Approach to Impact measurement here in Canada, because there are ways that an environmental charity and a social charity can all measure the impact in a way that makes sense to themselves. So in our case, we use a methodology called social return on investment. It's an international standard. And it's sort of playing back to that origin story. For all stakeholders that we influence, so that may be you as a donor, that may be Sonia as a volunteer, That may be the families that we directly support getting the beds and things they need for their housing. Maybe taxpayers. It may be government budgets for the landfill diversion that we do. We work with international proxies and economic ones and arrive essentially at an ROI that layers up to, for every dollar that is invested in Furniture Bank, there is a return back to society, community, and the environment of X dollars. It's never perfect. This is a marathon metaphor where you're always trying to improve it to be more precise. But I come back to the sustainability, having to do it in such a way that the organization can maintain it day in, day out, month in, month out, year over year, to help guide their decision making on how do they improve their programs.
Dan, thank you for that, because I did not know about that form of return, and I'm
yeah, it's Google Social Value International. They've been doing it for a very long time, far longer than ESG has been ESGing.
Okay.
And anybody technically could do it, but we find it works for Furniture Bank because we have everything sitting in Salesforce. It's very aligned with our operating model.
Right. So let's go back to when you mentioned Furniture Bank. We know what your role is there, and you let's go back to the 10 years ago when that recruiter contacted you, and you said you went for a walk around, if you will, and you decided to join Furniture Bank. Tell us about that, because I mean, as you described, it's quite a leap from the for-profit to the
and I think with the benefit of hindsight, I think I was having my Navy pirate. I've always been a pirate, but I'm a polite pirate. And I'd always Canadian.
The Canadian pirate.
And it was really, I was fortunate to have professional coaching at the time. And we had agreed that, Dan, you're wired to do good. Can you say I need help with X? I'll be like, sure, I'll help. I've always been that way. And when this came up, it very much aligned up with my marketing background, my business background, my analytics background, my environmental studies background. Like, it was tailor-made for me. And there was a number of serendipitous moments, like leaving my coach's apartment in downtown Toronto in a Furniture Bank truck loading up at the duplex next to me. Many, many moments of serendipity that reinforced that, this was actually the next career move. Up until that point, I worked for shareholders. I would do something, I would make it happen. Job was done, I'd move on. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. My resume looked like, just jumpy. 10 years now, which is surprising. But we were able to bring a lot of the ideas of, test, pilot, measure, learn, pivot. Most of my staff have never been in startups. They wouldn't, if they take them to, read the Lean Startup book, they were like, hey, we kind of do that. Kind of is the important word. We're not building software. We're helping. Every day we see up to 20 families, and we are capturing all of this community excess. And I think that's what lights me up, is that furniture and home goods as a category is one of the largest waste streams that we have. Most furniture, when you look around your house, 99% of what you see will end up in landfill if you were not intentional about making sure that it gets to reuse organizations. So we have this, on the one hand, this furniture waste crisis with, I think it was 12 million tons in the US going to landfill. From a carbon environmental perspective, that is an immense amount of, if your carbon is your measurement of impact, is a tremendous amount of wasted carbon. But when I started at this charity in a startup, you were like, how big is your addressable market? Now I said, well, I know who we're helping. We helped about 10 families a day, but how many families want to come? How many families
Right.
need us? Short version, we did the survey. Normally we would help just a little over 2,000 families in a given year. At the time, that survey came back and said, if you had the space, if you had the furniture, if, and if, there are 25,000 families who would come needing those goods. Otherwise, they are existing on floors, sleeping on floors, eating on floors, doing schoolwork on floors, not inviting anybody into their home, social isolation, and a cascade of very bad mental and physical issues that come from this type of poverty behind a closed door. So for me, this is a logistical issue.
Right.
There's all this furniture that's being destroyed by junkers and businesses every day as a perfectly normal part of their business processes. All we have to do is just pivot their behaviors so they spend the money that they're spending on destroying goods, they spend that money with reuse organizations. Because in the case of Furniture Bank here, our cycle time is 72 hours. And what that means for your listeners is if I come to your home for your sofa today, Ken, it's back at Furniture Bank later today. It's selected tomorrow, and it's in a new home the following day. That's a 72-hour cycle time. Now, when we get businesses in, they're like, no, that's not possible. 72-hour cycle time is very hard to achieve. And we've achieved it. But the downside is we're always 72 hours away from having nothing to give to families who need it, because our need is year round all the time.
Let's just double click a little bit on that cycle, because so you go into you pick up furniture, you warehouse it, and and the next day essentially it's going out to another family. Let's just start where it comes from, because you mentioned something really interesting when you're talking. As I mentioned, I had been a donor to, or I had provided furniture to Furniture Bank, and I thought things were just coming from homes, but there's an element of companies or corporations donating as well.
Yeah. So Furniture Bank back in 2010 sort of embraced this social enterprise idea, this model. So I don't know how much you cover social enterprises on this podcast, but the principle behind it is essentially it's a business where the outcomes have a social or environmental objective. So in our case, as I said in the presentation, is show of hands, how many people like moving furniture? And of course, the students, well, none of them put their hands up because they're embarrassed, but nobody likes moving furniture. So 2010, Furniture Bank started a social enterprise offering a socially and environmentally responsible furniture and home good removal service. So we would charge you, Ken, a market rate to remove your sofa and dining room table and everything else you need. We would give you a tax receipt for the donated goods, bring it back into the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And in the last, 4 years or so, we've serendipity again. We got the right connection with IKEA. What IKEA discussed, the problem they had was IKEA have a generous return policy. So, Ken, in the good old days, if you went and bought an IKEA mattress and you didn't like it, too hard, too soft, doesn't matter, and you returned it, they can't resell it. And it would go into a process to be destroyed. Now, I use the word destroyed because recycling sounds nice. But destruction is destruction. A perfectly good mattress was destroyed. Now, we started doing a pilot because we were like, we desperately need mattresses. Our ability to help more families is always a function of how many beds we can provide. So we started small, lean startup, small pilot in a Tobacco store around the corner. And we came one day a week type of thing, measure, meet, fine tune it. Then the other stores heard about it. And what has snowballed, I'm taking 4 years of very active and intensive work between IKEA Canada and Furniture Bank. And now Furniture Bank, we're like days, weeks away from being Canada's first highway certified charity social enterprise, which is code for, from IKEA's perspective, we could work for any IKEA location and be allowed to do so. So it's a big win for us. So now IKEA has solved our mattress problem. So we now have every day around the Greater Toronto area, our trucks are going to 4 stores and sweeping not just mattresses, but linens and other items that still are good for reuse. We struck on the reality that their problem was our solution.
Right.
And our problem was their solution. So there's this symbiotic way, but it is an economic way as well. They have an embedded history of understanding that no, you don't get to ask charities to do things for free, that you hire social enterprises to do this work at the same rates you would pay a for-profit. It's not about your legal entity. So we have a very robust commercial arrangement with them. And we continue to snowball that. So we're now working with IKEA to roll that same model out to other charities across the country. So it's very gratifying in that we sort of use Toronto as a test bed for people and planet related initiatives with IKEA. And then and we can help our cousins that do similar work to us across the country.
That's that's a wonderful story for both sides, and a wonderful outcome for so many. So, but what happens then? So you've got this furniture coming in again. You've got this incredible turnaround. You only have, what is it, about 20 families a day that are. How do you select? Do you sell? Do you gift?
Nope.
How does it all work?
So to my business friends, I simply say, we run a picky junking company, and we run a furniture retailer where we give the furniture away for free.
Okay.
So the flow of goods that we pick up every day, so we usually have between 4 and 5 trucks out on the road going to businesses and households who have the problem of, what do I do with my furniture, my home goods, my microwaves, etc. That comes back into the showroom, and we've organized the facility here in Etobicoke as a showroom where all the desks are in one area, the dining room tables are another, mattresses are another, and the families that are coming in every day are matched up with a volunteer, and they have 45 minutes to go into that showroom and build a home that speaks to them. So this isn't take it. This is like we, the charity, have decided what you get. Choice has been a very important part of how the charity works. So if that family, there's a pink sofa on the floor and they love pink, they take it. It's their home. All the furniture that they select is theirs at no charge. That furniture is then organized into the delivery area to be delivered in the following day. When I say 20, that's when everything's perfect. We're swimming in furniture. The aisles are tight. There's enough furniture that, the 20th family that comes in has a reasonable selection to build a home from. Okay. But it's seasonal. In February, nobody wants to move. Nobody wants to downsize. Nobody wants to go shopping for furniture. So we have to ratchet that down. So it's always a balancing act of furniture in, furniture out, and always managing that. An average family is leaving with between 20 and 25 items of goods to actually assemble into a home. That we've got that data for nearly a decade. We've been monitoring those things. So if there's more goods coming into the organization, we're able to amp up the appointments so more families can get access. So we're always trying to, our throwaway line is, we're always trying to help more people better. That the mix of goods that we're receiving, if they're brand new, they go straight on the floor. We don't resell the goods we're given.
Right. So one last operational question, Dan. So, you said 20 to 25 pieces. Some can be furniture, some can obviously be mattress and linens. How do they get it home?
We provide the other side is our social enterprise of delivery service. So unlike the social enterprise on the pickup side, right, we provide at cost. So we do a full cost analysis every year. and it's just the cost of getting our truck, our team, our insurance, our gas out. About 2/3 of the agencies of the families that we see are covering that cost on the behalf of the family.
Dan Kershaw, Executive Director, Furniture Bank. It's amazing how fast our time goes.
Yes, it is. It is.
That was just, you know what? As I said it off the top, I just so enjoyed your talk at the University of Toronto, and I so enjoyed having you as a guest today. And I think there's one other lesson, not just for students who are in the room or people who are listening, to finish off with. Sir Ken Robinson, he wrote about being in your element and
Yeah,
being
finding my element.
Yeah, just that it's that pathway where passion and skill set meet, and moving from 1 to 2, 3 years in a role to 10 plus and still hyper enthusiastic. I think it's a great story on its own.
Yeah, no, Ken Robinson I've been following for years, and yes, I did find my element, and I have many years to go to end furniture poverty across this country, because there's plenty of goods that can get passed back into the community, and that's what we're trying to do here at Furniture Bank.
Dan, thanks so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Ken.